morning. Good morning. Good morning, LinkedIn Live. It's saying we are live. It sometimes takes a little while to connect to LinkedIn, I've noticed lately. So good morning, everyone. Good morning. If you're watching live, please do say good morning in the comments. Good morning, Hira.
Good morning, Cheryl. Pleasure to be here with you today. How are you?
I am good, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you. And do you know what? I've just spotted all of the books in the background. You know, I'm an absolute book nerd, right?
Oh, thank you. Yes.
I love
Yeah.
books. I absolutely love books. So I've got Hira Ali with me, author of Her Allies, as she has in her tag there. If anybody's not following Hira Ali, I'm kind of like, well, where have you been? Like, Hira is, one of the thought leaders on not just on LinkedIn, on many platforms actually, because you also I want to say just as part of your intro, and yeah, if you are watching live, please do say good morning in the chat. Let us know what the weather's like. Where I am in Shropshire, it's very bright and sunny, but it's cold, right? It looks bright where you are as well, Hira, right? So it's
It
saying
is very
bright
bright
but
and
cold.
sunny and cold, but had to draw
Yeah.
the curtains down because there was a bit of glare.
Yeah. So I'm joined by Hira Ali, who is an author, writer, speaker. And we were just saying before we joined here that you have been running some workshops this week as well with some clients from across the pond. So, a global author in this topic of allyship and everything inclusion. I want to say, are you also a Forbes contributor? Forbes or Harvard Business Review?
I
I can't
I
remember.
am a Harvard. Yes, I'm a Harvard
Harvard.
Business Review contributor, and I have written many articles for Forbes as well.
Yeah. Forbes. So, person after my own heart, loves reading, as you can see in the background, but also loves writing. Good morning, Emma Claire. Bright and sunny in Peterborough today. Ice on all the cars. I know. That's just like, this British weather. As I always say, we can never start one of these LinkedIn lives without talking about the weather, right? It just how it is
Absolutely.
in the UK. So we've had a busy week. We were just talking about that, weren't we, here? Good morning, Reg Amoa. Thank you for joining us. Sunny
Morning.
in East London. It's sunny in East London. That's good to hear. Um, Here we were just sort of saying before we jumped on about the week that you'd had, and you said that you've been doing some workshops for some people in the States this week. So just tell us a little bit about your week and what you've been up to this week.
Wow, it's been such an eventful week. Lots going on. So I started off with a workshop on Monday for a client in the US. It was a workshop on allyship.
Yeah,
Wasn't sure it's going to go ahead, but very happy it did, given the current climate. It's very
yeah,
reassuring to know that organizations are still persisting. And I think the participants were very receptive and very keen to learn about allyship and the roles they can play on the allyship
yeah,
journey. So I think that was very heartwarming, very encouraging. Then on Tuesday, I what was I doing? On Tuesday, I was actually attending the launch of the British Muslim Network. And then on Wednesday, I was in Eastleigh delivering another workshop, a leadership development workshop.
yeah,
Yesterday, I had coaching sessions and another shorter workshop actually. It was for sponsors. And today I'm here with you in the morning.
it's been a jam-packed week. Uh, but as you were saying, so good that there is still the appetite to talk about these topics even across the pond, so the workshops that you run on allyship, for example, which obviously is what we're going to get into, and then ending the week with, we're obviously about to go into Ramadan, which we were saying before we joined as well. So for those of you that are on LinkedIn, you'd have probably seen quite a few people posting about the fact that we are just going into Ramadan. So thank you so much, Hira Ali, for joining us, and thank you to everyone that has joined us live. Your background is incredibly interesting in terms of, your work as a coach, but also as an NLP practitioner, somebody that's really, you strike me as somebody that's really delved into the science of the way that people think, the way that we behave, the way that we operate, etc. You know, would you agree with that? You know, are you sort of like fascinated by sort of like human behavior almost?
Absolutely, I am. I've always been a people's person, and that's the reason why I took human resources as a major in when I did my MBA. It was actually
Yeah,
double majors. I did HR and marketing, and my father was in HR, so he inspired me to get into this field. So I've always been a people's person. I think
yeah,
NLP, I would say, is something I discovered as a result of something. My father passed away. It's very interesting. My father passed away. I was very depressed for the longest time. And a person who
right.
used to love people around her started not liking people as much. And that's when I decided, oh my God, I need to do something
Interesting.
about this. And that's when I actually took up the NLP certification and a coaching certification just to
Right.
understand people better. And I think it has such a huge impact in
Yeah,
being more kind and empathetic.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Do you know
So
what?
that's how
It's
it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think that even, you know, in this work, you know, around this work of allyship, inclusion, diversity, equity, etc., the skills around, you know, understanding how people think, understanding behaviors, understanding neuroscience and psychology, I think is actually really critical. And I actually think a lot of, if we call it sort of DEI training, maybe doesn't go into those areas enough, you know, the behavioral change side of things. Just a couple more shout outs. Sobia Jawade, good morning,
Good morning,
Sobia.
Miss
So
India.
nice that you could join us. I've been desperate to get Sobia on here for ages. So good morning, Sobia. It's great to see you. And Hansa Pedinagari. Good morning, Hansa. And Niharika. Good morning, Nihar. How are you doing? I feel as though it's been forever since I've seen you. Good to see you both live talk about such an incredibly important subject of allyship. You're absolutely right, Nihar. So let's jump to this, right? Allyship. You've literally written the book on it, right? You've literally written about allyship. It's your wheelhouse. So part of why I'm doing these redefining conversations, you know, there is so much talk at the moment about DEI and it's become abbreviated and it's become quite confused, as in, I almost think sometimes people aren't clear what they're talking about. So in the next, you know, sort of few series of LinkedIn Lives, we're sort of like breaking down some of these words. So allyship, what exactly do we mean when we talk about allyship? Whether that's looking at a company or an organization, or in those small everyday interactions, just tell us from your perspective, what do we even mean by the word allyship?
So, very simply put, allies are individuals, right, who support, champion, and advocate for others who may not share the same privilege as them. And this privilege can be related to gender, race, sexual orientation, ability, socioeconomic background, or any other social identity factor that determines access to power and resources. But allies are not saviors, protectors, or knights in shining armor. I think that's a huge disclaimer we need to make because, even though these interventions in some cases might be necessary to rescue people, the majority of us do not need saving. We do not wish to be rescued. So I think allies need to avoid being patronizing or condescending or worse, knowing it all. And I
Yeah,
think on an organization level, I've written a whole chapter on what it means to be an ally on the organization level, right? But it's literally, being everything, performing a culture audit, being transparent about the pay gap, impartial hiring practices, flexibility, unbiased appraisals, inclusive networking opportunities, structuring diverse events. There's so much scope when it comes to an organization level. However, Cheryl, as you would agree, that true allyship begins with you,
yeah,
right? Even when you try to push for systemic changes on a macro level, and you call out discrepancies, it cannot be done unless you first challenge yourself to do better, right? And
yeah,
challenging yourself is also about ongoing education, being aware of what's going on, because obviously you can't change what you don't know
yeah,
about, right? So, and then
yeah.
recognizing bias.
Yeah.
listening, all of
Yeah.
that.
I love that. I mean, there's so many things that you said there here. I feel as though you almost like covered everything that we're going to cover today. But there were so many things that you said that I wanted to just pick up on. So first of all, you said, oh, and good morning, Sanam Majid as well, who has said, I love following your journey here and more power to you,
Yeah.
from Sanam. So thank you, Sanam. And also, good morning, Bernadette Thompson, OBE. So much
Like,
scope
good
indeed here,
morning.
are so many areas to focus on, and it does start with us as individuals. And I love a couple of the things that you said there, Hira. First of all, you said it's not about being a knight in shining armor, right? So it's not about saving, you know, or that kind of like savior aspect. And just some of those. Well, the first thing that I want to start with, you talked about it starting with education, and Sanam has said, you know, change starts within first, and that education often is the first piece. You know, we were talking off air about Ramadan, and which is a great opportunity from an allyship perspective to, you know, just to learn more, you know, what is Ramadan, or, you know, as we go into, for example, we'll be going into Lent soon, you know, what is Lent, or, you know, in April as we go into Passover, you know, what are these things and what do they mean and why are they important to individuals. So it starts with the education. But I wanted to pull on, you said, you mentioned some really good opportunities where there are for allyship, and I want to pull on one of them that you talked about, which was, you talked about pay transparency. You mentioned that, and I'm aware of individuals, men in particular. So if we think about, say, for example, the gender pay gap, and I know you do a lot of work around men and allyship, and I'm aware of men who have like being very open with female colleagues around their pay, you know, as a way of being an ally, you know, not in any way to boast or anything like that, but just being transparent with it, so that if there are inequities, you know, the women understand, you know, what's going on, and can therefore you know, speak up for themselves, and or with the support, you know, of the individual that has shared that information. So even just sharing that information is being an ally, right?
Yes, sharing that information is so vital. And I have quoted
Yeah.
examples in my books of people who have done that. And as a result of that, women were able to demand more, ask for more.
Yeah.
I literally 3 days ago, Cheryl, in the allyship workshop that I conducted in the US, somebody shared that he realized that a female engineer in his team was getting 30% less than her direct report. Can you
Wow.
imagine? She was making less money than the men reporting to her. And when he
Wow.
saw that, he obviously said, I need to bring her up to level first. You know, I need to first close this pay gap before I do anything else. And she has been in the organization for 7 years, and she'd actually become a recent mom, and her child was experiencing health issues, as a result of which sometimes she had to
Yeah.
drop everything and go and look after the child. And she was getting
Yeah.
backlash for that, and people were not being very supportive. And this person was like, here is this woman who is anyway working less than what she needs to be paid, and then on top of that, you're just making her life miserable because she chooses to be a mom. And then he thankfully took it up upon himself to address that. And I feel like this is so important. I mean, there's so many such cases we obviously don't even
Yeah.
know about or hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's a brilliant example, and a very practical way that allyship around pay discrepancy, you know, when you see that, when anybody sees that, you know, advocating for somebody and speaking up and being an ally is a really great example. Sanam has said here, change starts from within us first. And then here I've got a morning, I'm checking my phone. This is Jill. Good morning, Jill. How are you doing? Jill's a good friend of mine. We'll be WhatsApping after this, unpacking everything that's discussed this morning. Rob Neal, OBE, good morning. Good morning, Cheryl. Good morning, Hira. Loving your illuminating conversation. Brilliant stuff. And just on some other examples of allyship as well, there's something I heard. So I was at an International Women's Day event on Tuesday, which was on Tuesday because they didn't want to clash with Ramadan, which I thought was great. You know, that's really quite thoughtful. But one thing that was talked about in some of the panels, there was an organisation that have a Men as Allies program, and one of the things that they talked about was, for example, we know the stats around women not wanting to apply for jobs unless they can tick all of the boxes, right? So if we know that statistic, what can we do to be an ally to those women? For example, if you see a role that you think that person could do, right, we can have the conversation with that individual, and we can potentially bolster their confidence and tell them why we think they would be good at that job, and potentially depending on where you are in the organization, potentially support them through the process, right?
Absolutely, yes. And I think the issue is women are over mentored, we're under sponsored, and we really need allies to step up as sponsors and give them access to opportunities they previously didn't have access to. And yes, I think one of the main things is bolstering their confidence, right? Because women tend to undersell themselves and they feel like, they're not good enough. And when they have a senior person who believes in them and champions for them and tells them, no, you're good enough, you can do this, right? And one thing I do want to highlight is give them opportunity, right? And do not micromanage, but then do not leave them completely on their own, because then in that case, it might be some form of benign sabotage, because women might feel like, okay, I'm not able to do this on my own. So be there, don't be there every step of the way, but be there to support them when they encounter challenges or when they experience self-doubt. And that's how you can really show up as an ally in these little interactions that you do on an everyday basis, where you are listening to them, right? Acknowledging responsibility. And also, I would say, is embracing the discomfort, right? I think as an ally, one of the first things we need to do is that we need to be able to embrace the discomfort, lean into the discomfort, and address these difficult topics with honesty.
Yeah. And then linking back to something else that you said, and I want to sort of maybe move on to this in terms of the speaking up and when to speak up as allies, which I think can be tricky to navigate sometimes if it's not done well, right? So let's just maybe talk about that. So how do allies get this right in terms of, and you were sort of talking about the example of not micromanaging and not taking over. So what does it look like when allies do it well in terms of speaking up for and supporting, but not kind of like taking over and disempowering and, taking away somebody else's voice? Just give us some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I know one of the questions you did ask earlier as well was whether allies should be speaking up versus staying silent. And is it ever okay to stay silent? And I would say, if I had to answer in one word, Cheryl, the answer is no. As cliched as it may sound, silence is complicity. However, what I do want to acknowledge is that real world situations are often nuanced and complex. And in some cases, speaking out could put you at risk physically or professionally. And in those moments, exercising caution is understandable. But if it is silence purely about prioritizing your comfort and your likability, then that's not okay. You do need to speak up, and there are multiple ways to call out harm. Not all of them have to be public or confrontational. So I say, if something inappropriate has been said in the meeting, one strategy is silence. Use silence as a tool, not engaging with an inappropriate remark. For example, just pause. Silence can be powerful, and people often feel compelled to fill in the void, and they may realize their misstep, right? I think what matters is that allies take action rather than stand by as apathetic bystanders. There are different ways of calling out, right? There's the direct way. There's the distracting, shifting attention away. There's the delegating. If you can't do it yourself, then ask someone else to do it. There's also the delay. If you can't do it then check in later on. So what I'm trying to say is allyship isn't about having the perfect response. It's about choosing action every time over indifference in whatever little way you can. And I think there was lots in the question you asked. You said, What does it look like when done well? Gosh, I did a post about fake allies a while ago. And I did talk about, when it's done well, it's obviously about amplifying others rather than making yourself the center of attention. And it's
Yeah.
also about not just making public statements, but also private actions. I think allyship is as much about what you do at work as it is about what you do outside work. So
Yeah.
obviously, engaging in difficult conversations is one of them. And then supporting a broad spectrum of people. It's not just only those people with whom you share an affinity. We all have affinity bias. And something I do tend to see in many well-intentioned allies is they only tend to reach out or support or speak up for people who are just like them. So yeah, all of that. And how do you make sure that allies don't disempower people? I would say it's about collaboration, not control, right? So you
Yeah.
really need to create space rather than taking it up, and center the voices of the people that you are supporting, rather than
Yeah.
assuming that you know what's best.
Yeah. I love that. So many things that I mean, I loved what you said about you're almost giving like a masterclass in terms of how to act, and it's not always the same in every situation, right? So when we talked about, is it ever okay to be silent versus to speak up, and you talked about the importance of speaking up because, as you said, silence can be taken as complicity depending on what's happened. But I loved your example there of, for example, if you are in a meeting situation and somebody says something inappropriate, that silence can be such a powerful form of allyship, especially, if you're the meeting chair and, you sort of don't respond. And then, as you say, it could be then that afterwards there is a private conversation then that's had, you know what I mean? So these different ways of handling. I just wanted to loop back into some of the comments here. Over mentored and under sponsored. Love this. Sponsorship is such a key path to travel in terms of corporate allyship. I'm a big fan of sponsorship. I love mentoring, and mentoring has its place, but for me, especially if we're talking about advancing individuals within an organization, sponsorship every time is
Absolutely,
where I
it's
am
great.
personally. Good morning, Hardev. Good morning, Hardev has joined us as well. Hardev, um, in fact, I had a conversation with Hardev yesterday about men as allies, and actually men allyship towards men, right? So men, not just being seen in this ally bracket. So maybe we'll have time to talk about this. Allyship should also be about ERG, so employee resource groups, employee networks, working together and collaborating for knowledge exchange and raising awareness. We have a collective network session for our men's group, REACH, that's the race and ethnicity group, and women's health network for prostate cancer awareness month next month. Love that, because obviously when it comes to things like prostate, in fact, that's a really good example, Hardev. Prostate cancer awareness. We know that we know the stats around that, but that is a really good area where women then become the allies for men, right? And women, can be the ones that advocate for and do the learning in order to support men in that space, right? Would you agree with that, Hira?
Absolutely. And Cheryl, that's what I feel like when allyship is seen as a responsibility of a specific department or individual, it becomes burdensome and
Yeah,
unsustainable. Instead, if
yeah,
every person took the time to reflect on their own privilege and consider how they could leverage it to support those who don't share the same privilege and advantages, the world will be a much better place. I know Bernadette mentioned about getting people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds into the network. I saw that
yeah,
comment, and absolutely, right? I mean, you need to see, yes, as an Asian brown Muslim immigrant woman, I tick many boxes, but there are some areas in which I would be privileged. So, where can I use my privilege to help those who don't share it?
yeah. And a really good example. Yeah, I'm so glad that you pulled us back to Bernadette's comment, because here the people from lower social economic backgrounds can benefit from active allies who bring them into their networks. And one of the learns that I had, and this was when I was involved in the Black Talent Awards, which the lovely Bernadette is a judge for, is things like when you make introductions into your network. So you make an introduction into your network, don't always assume that that person knows how to respond or how to take up that introduction, right? So I remember I made an introduction of a very young person. We have youth judges, and it was a young person, very new into the workplace. So I made an introduction and I said to her, I said, right, I'm going to make an introduction. Once I've made that introduction, I want you to draft an email that you're going to send to them and let me see it first. And we'll work on it together and then you can send it. Because sometimes when you open a door for somebody, you have to help them through. You know, if they're not used to that space, you have to help them into that space.
I love that. Yes. Because otherwise you end, I mean, yes, you give them the opportunity, but then because you withdraw yourself too soon, then you're not going all the way through and that person is lost. And that's the reason why I feel even for women or other marginalized groups, when sponsors are supporting them, don't micromanage, but don't desert them. Just be there and just be, make sure that you are responding to their queries or helping them in situations where they previously had no prior experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just pick out something that Sophia has said. Good morning, Sophia Nichols. I hope you are well. Sophia said actions speak louder than words, and a leader speaks out when they act to address discrimination and create a culture of safety and belonging. Maybe something, and I didn't have this in like the pre-questions, but the importance of leaders as allies. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit? The importance of when the leader demonstrates and role models what allyship looks like and the power of that in organizations.
Absolutely. So I think leadership is allyship. I think when people think that leadership and allyship are mutually exclusive, I think a lot of people think that, but leadership is allyship, right? If you want to be a good leader, you need to be an ally. And when you have that privilege to speak up, I think you absolutely must. So earlier I shared the example of when you are still not comfortable, I said perhaps you can stay silent and not engage. But if you are somebody who has that position and power to address a harm, then you absolutely must do it, right? There's no second thoughts about this. You can't really say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to be quiet and ignore it. No, you have the responsibility to be able to call out something, whether it's someone else's idea has been taken over, someone being talked over, an inappropriate comment being made. I mean, there's so many different forms of discrimination. And I think allies can show up every day. And you know what? I'll give you an example. In a team, there was a very senior leader who used to very frequently engage in inappropriate comments. So what some of the allies in the team did, they said, you know what, we're going to speak up every time. They divided the responsibility and they said, this time I'm going to speak up, next time you're going to speak. So, and I found that very fascinating and interesting because sometimes it can be isolating and exhausting to be the only one calling it out. So they literally formed a coalition and they said, we're going to divide the responsibility, and every time one person is going to speak up and say this is wrong, this is inappropriate, this shouldn't have been said. So yeah, again, when there is the intention to do well, I think there are so many different ways to handle the situation. But I think complicity and silence should never be the option. It's not about, like I said, having the perfect response, but it's about not ignoring something or just sort of saying, oh, he did mean it, or it was unintentional. Because I think one of the things as a leader you can't do is assume positive intent on behalf of your team. You might have gotten over an inappropriate comment because been there, done that, I don't mind, but somebody in your team might be upset. And you can't, on behalf of your team members, say, well, you know what, it's fine, take it easy, you're being emotional. You just can't. You have to speak up on their behalf, if not for yourself.
Yeah, I really like that. That's so useful. You're absolutely right here. There is an additional level of responsibility placed on leaders. I mean, it's what they're paid for, right? It's what leaders are paid to lead, and allyship is a part of that. I wanted to come to this point that Sanam has made, because I think this is so relevant as we go into, particularly into the month of Ramadan, right? We should be comfortable educating others about things that are important to us, religion, culture, etc. Colleagues actually want to learn and appreciate the different perspectives. There's also, and I interacted with a post recently where somebody was saying, you may get in some workplaces, some people don't like talking about religion, and I mentioned this on my post today. And that's okay, actually. You just get some people, and it may particularly be, for example, people of a particular generation, or they've been brought up with certain values that are like, you don't talk about religion or politics, because they can be tricky topics, and I get that. But I'll probably amend to this morning's post, right? Because I do need to just make this clear. However, the one thing I would say, and as we go into the month of Ramadan, let's not have that used as an excuse for Islamophobia, right? I'm just going to call it what it is, right? Because I see that being used as in, oh, we don't want to keep talking about religion. Sometimes that is used disproportionately towards certain religions. So I'm gonna, my plea to everybody that's watching this either live or on the replays, as we go into something like the month of Ramadan, if you hear things like, oh, you shouldn't talk about religion at work, it's fine for somebody to have that as a point of view. That's absolutely fine. I mean, they can just look away, when somebody is having those conversations, but that should not be used as an excuse for, discrimination or harassment against a particular faith or religion. And I think that potentially is how it's sometimes used, but certainly on social media. And I just want people to be aware of that as we go into the month of Ramadan as well. Just your thoughts on that, maybe, Hira.
So one thing I do want to warn against cultural taxation, because sometimes you feel like just because you represent a community doesn't mean that you're the person who's going to be the one taking up the responsibility to educate everyone. Yes, I would love to do it, but I would also encourage allies to do their own learning, to do their own education, right? That's very important. And the second thing is, it's about psychological safety for everyone. So whether you are somebody who is a practicing person of faith, or you're somebody who doesn't have any faith, that should be absolutely fine. But that should never come in the way of people feeling respected. So for example, things like fasting, praying, they are very important parts of a Muslim identity for a huge majority of Muslims. So if you're saying, I'm not looking at religion, I'm not talking about religion, that's fine. You're entitled to your own opinions. But then at the same time, you have to acknowledge and appreciate the fact that religion is part of the core identity of lots of Muslims. And it's not just about Islam, right? It's all different religions, whether it's a Jew, whether it's a Hindu, a Christian, a Buddhist, Sikh. There's so many different religions. And I think just being mindful and intentional is important. Even if you think that, I'm somebody who doesn't talk about religion and politics, that's fine. But like you said, doesn't give you an excuse to, for any sort of phobias or isms at the workplace.
Exactly. Yeah. Shaista has summed it up here. She said, it's tiring to be the only one calling it out all the time. So I love your example there here of a team, kind of almost like coming up with a strategy of how they're going to, respond. I mean, it's sad that we have to have those strategies, right? To deal with these things. But that's just the way it is at times, I guess. We talked about going into Ramadan. And so, we may as well share it. For those of you that are on the live, I was talking to Hira off camera about the fact that last year I thought about fasting for Ramadan, but I thought about it on day one. I was like, oh, shall I just, and I thought, no, I haven't thought about it enough. But this year, so I'm now putting it out to the universe, so I absolutely have to do it. But this year, for the last couple of weeks, I had been thinking about fasting for Ramadan. And then a friend of mine just earlier in the week invited me to an iftar meal, and I was like, that's a sign that maybe I should, and going back to what Sanam was saying, for me this was about the education. So even just making that decision to say, I'm going to do that this Ramadan, just to see, but it already put my mind into the space of, I want to learn more about it. Where does it come from? Why? So it takes you, and I guess this is the thing about allyship, right? When you it's that journey towards becoming an ally, you kind of start with the bit of curiosity, then you want to learn a bit more, then you want to put yourself in the shoes of, and all of that, kind of, it just builds and builds so that you really start to understand that person. It's never going to be the same as that person's lived experience. But I thought, what a coincidence, that we're talking about allyship. And for me, in terms of my decision to fast for Ramadan, it was almost taking me on a journey of allyship.
And thank you for your allyship, Cheryl, because I have to acknowledge, obviously, it's not easy when you do it for the first time. So the fact that you want to do it and you are embracing this journey, I mean, lots of love and support to you. If you need any of us in any way to coach you through or to assist you, if you want any questions, please feel free to reach out, because I think it's absolutely amazing that you're doing this.
Yeah. Oh, honestly, it's the least I could do. And I think one of the things I mentioned in the post, I know that in some organizations you have things like the employee resource groups that will maybe support other allies again that want to maybe fast for a day. So maybe they just want to do it for the day and, maybe have some sort of iftar celebration at the end as well. So there are lots of opportunities. I think we're going into a great period for really learning what true allyship is about and just being, more aware of allyship. Just any before we wrap things up today, Hira, any final thoughts from you, I guess, bits of advice for anybody that's watching this about how they can become better allies for themselves?
I think, allyship is all about humility and continuous learning. Allies don't assume or shouldn't assume, or they shouldn't expect that they have all the answers or that they won't make mistakes, right? If you are embracing the allyship journey, you are going to make mistakes, and that's absolutely fine. It's about acknowledging responsibility when when there is a faux pas committed, and just moving on from there. And look, allyship, it can be isolating, so I always say that allies need allies too. We all can be allies to each other if we're able to understand and reflect on our own privilege and consider how we can leverage it. Like I said, the world is going to be a much better space. It's something which is a continuously learning and evolving journey. So don't think that I'm not going to be an ally because I don't have all the answers, or because I'm going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
This is going to happen, and this is part of the
Yeah,
allyship process. But once you do it, then
absolutely.
know that there will be many others there to support you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to pull in a couple of comments that have literally whizzed in just as we're wrapping up. This one here by Reg, I think is really interesting. I think the intersectional focus is really important. I've been in workplaces where the focus for allyship was senior white middle / upper class men being allies to mainly white middle class women. So it felt a bit invisible if you didn't fall within either category. If we find a way to demonstrate that inclusion is about everyone, that's how we can challenge the attacks on DEI initiatives. In some cases, you'll be an ally, and in other cases, you'll be the recipient of allyship. Absolutely. So many things in there, Reg, that we may not have time to unpack, but you're absolutely right in terms of thinking intersectionally about men and women as well, actually, so in terms of particularly when we think about men that need allyship, and men even that fall into those categories that you talked about, sometimes based on what they're going through in their life, right, may need allyship. But again, if you take it at the intersection of, say, race or class or disability or sexual orientation, then yes, we definitely need to think about allyship more broadly. And
Sorry, can I
yeah,
just
go ahead,
quickly
Kira.
add? I just want to say that
Yeah,
intersectionality, which thank you so much for pointing out. That's
yeah,
very, very important to me, and that's the reason why we launched this Men as Allies Partnering for Inclusion program last year, because one of the
yeah.
main focus was intersectionality and cultural intelligence to allow allies to learn from that lens, from that diverse perspective, and not just from a one-sided perspective. So thank you for mentioning
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Reg, I mean, interestingly, and maybe I'll connect with Reg afterwards, but one of the things I've been thinking about in terms of the allyship for men, one of the statistics we often hear about is, for example, risk of death by suicide when we talk about men, right? But I was like, is it the same? Men are not a monolith. So I've been really delving into that statistic by age, but which we know this is by age, by race, by class. It's really interesting. It's not a monolith. I will always question the intention of an
I,
ally. I mean, yeah, go ahead, Hira.
So one thing I want to say is that we sometimes do underestimate or sideline the challenges that allies face on the allyship journey. So I think in my book, and I think a recent report by Daniele on male allyship highlighted some of these barriers and difficulties that allies may encounter. So I think it is also important to know if we don't acknowledge these challenges, we risk missing out on valuable opportunities for progress. So we do need to pay attention to that as well.
Absolutely. And everywhere I've seen your comment about the intention of an ally. I think we covered that earlier in terms of allyship is really about, it is not about the ally centering themselves, right? That shouldn't be the intent. So it shouldn't be coming from a place of ego, basically. Sophia said here, walking through the door, my son has set up a network for young people from ethnic backgrounds to access opportunities. And it's interesting to note the challenges some of them have in understanding how to use or take up the opportunity. I think for those of us, particularly if we've been in the corporate space or if we're in the business space, we just assume that if we make somebody an email introduction or something, that they're going to know what to do. And they don't always. We have to either check in with them or as I say, we kind of have to help them through that. Definitely. Yeah. Emotional intelligence, cultural, intellectual empathy and love will make a huge impact on both allies and those being supported. What a lovely way to bring this conversation to an end. I think I hear. And here is so much I'm in awe of anyone who fasts. Give it a go, at least for a day. Whoever that person is, give it a go at least for a day. Hira, thank you so much for joining me at the start of Ramadan, because I know you've had such a busy week, and then I know we've got Ramadan starting this weekend, right?
Absolutely. No, it was a pleasure to be here. As you know, allyship is an important topic. It's very close to my heart. And what better month to be in than Ramadan?
Exactly.
I think where we can all be allies to each other. And I think it's all about translating those intentions into positive actions. That's where true allyship lies. And happy Ramadan to everyone who's celebrating. And Cheryl, please do reach out when you do fast. Love to support you.
I will do. Thank you. And anybody who wants to obviously find out more about Hira's work and her books, please do check out her website. But obviously you can connect with her here on LinkedIn if you want to find out more about her work. If you missed the introduction, Hira is a writer for such esteemed publications like the Harvard Business Review and also Forbes, as well as having her own book. So and if you've got any questions about Ramadan and what allyship should look like going into the month of Ramadan, please do reach out as well. Final comment, Shaista, you got the final comment in just about don't talk about religion does not mean you can be ignorant about it and keep asking, not even water.
Yes.
Shaista, I love that. You're so right. You're so right. So I'm encouraging all of you allies, just have your ears open as we go into the holy month of Ramadan. Hira, thank you so much. Ramadan Mubarak to you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you are listening on the live, Linda, I just spotted your comment. Thank you if you're listening on the live. If you're listening on the replay, thank you for taking 42 minutes out of your day to listen to this conversation. And I hope it's helped you in some way. Have a fabulous weekend, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.